recognizes the honorable member from Marco City.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is an honor to have this opportunity to once again speak in this House on behalf of the people of Marco City and, by extension, Bahamians throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, as I speak, my mother, Sister Laura Benson, is in Yellow Elder, where she's lived for several decades, and I want to say thank you to my mother for being my greatest support during the most difficult times in my life. I recall, Madam Speaker, when I would get in problems in school, even when I was suspended at A.F. Adley on 2 separate occasions and eventually expelled, transferred to R.M. Bailey, and they didn't accept me, and I ended up back at A.F. Adley. And I remember administrators saying that it was on the basis of the character of my mother. And I made a commitment that I would change my life. And I remember in grade 10, I would change my life to make sure that the evenings my mother cried because her children, me chiefly, was grieving her spirit, and she prayed for us and was concerned about our welfare. And so I want to say to my mom how much I love you and I appreciate you. And I know that it is your prayers and godly example that has sustained me over these many years. And Madam Speaker, sometimes 2 times a week or more, I would get up roughly around 4:30, not later than 5, kiss my wife, go and get dressed, go into the other bedroom to say goodbye to my daughter as I rushed to catch the 6:30 flight to come here into New Providence to continue the people's work. And so, Madam Speaker, when we come, particularly those of us who come from Family Islands or Grand Bahama, we come with a sense of urgency given the level of challenges that we face just to show up every day to work. But Madam Speaker, I would not have this opportunity to be here today to participate in this budget had it not been for the people of Marco City who embraced me, who put me on their shoulders and delivered me to this place, to continue the work that all of us have been doing, not just in Marco City, but throughout Grand Bahama and by extension on other islands. Madam Speaker, I have really the most incredible team that I work with. Men and women, young people who for years have been making sacrifices on behalf of the people of Grand Bahama in particular. Persons who talk straight to you. People who give you advice not because they are looking for anything personally, but because they want better for the community that they grew up in. And so I say to all of our team members, those that are in the office, those that worked in the aftermath of Dorian, where we worked 7 days a week, from the beginning of September to December, going into every constituency, delivering support, and being a source of strength to so many. I want to say to the team in Marco City, I'm eternally grateful to you for this rare opportunity. Madam Speaker, distinguished members of this House, today I stand before you to address the people of the Bahamas and to shed light on a budget that we expected would have delivered more for the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, we are at a pivotal juncture in our country's history. And we recognize that we have accomplished much on the international stage. When people ask who we are, if they say in athletics, we're able to cite multiple names that have set world records. that have set the standard, whether it's Shawnee Miller-Weibo, whether it's Troy Camp, whether it's Fireman Brown. There are so many examples. On the basketball court, we have set a new standard from the days of Sweet Bell and the Globetrotters. Madam Speaker, if they ask who we are in entrepreneurship and in science, we just can't help but call incredible names, whether it's Isha Bowe at NASA or, as we talked earlier today, Madam Speaker, about an incredible young man who has emerged in the area of architectural designs and construction, who we have now retained once again, first under the Free National Movement and now under this government, setting a standard of excellence. But, Madam Speaker, if we rest on our laurels, we would not be in a position to change the country for the better. And so we have to look forward, Madam Speaker. We have to look not merely to the past 50 years and beyond, but we have to look to the future, Madam Speaker. And so today, we do a careful evaluation of this budget. We believe that it is our duty to hold this administration accountable and advocate for the welfare of our citizens. The budget, Madam Speaker, should be a reflection of the government's commitment to addressing the needs and aspiration of our people. And so, Madam Speaker, this side, we recognize that we are the people's employees, that we are the servants of our people. My colleague and I have committed ourselves to being responsive, Madam Speaker, to you, the Bahamian public, to your concerns as you face many challenges. And we have committed to being vigilant on critical issues that face you. Madam Speaker, in this budget, we expected to see concrete plans that would uplift the Bahamian people, stimulate economic growth, and address the pressing issues our nation faces. However, Madam Speaker, what we have witnessed is, in many ways, disheartening. An absence of measures to provide genuine relief to individuals and businesses grappling with the economic consequences of Dorian and COVID, and facing other challenges, some induced nationally and others internationally. Madam Speaker, the scarcity of support for small businesses is alarming, and we know that they are the backbone of this society. These enterprises, Madam Speaker, have faced immense hardships from prolonged closures, reduced consumer spending. We were hopeful that this budget would offer some targeted assistance, such as financial relief, access to credit, investment incentives. Instead, Madam Speaker, we witnessed yet another missed opportunity to reignite this spirit of entrepreneurship and restore the livelihoods of hard-working Bahamians. And if, Madam Speaker, workshops were being held in Grand Bahama and grants were being issued, Madam Speaker, somehow it missed Marco City. I'm not sure how well it found its way to Central and East Grand Bahama, Madam Speaker.
No, sir. No, sir.
So it appears as if, yes, maybe the help was targeted, but certainly it did not target us and those that we represent. Additionally, the failure to introduce comprehensive plans to address the escalating cost of living, including skyrocketing inflation, is deeply troubling. The burden on Bahamian families to increase their earning capacity, Madam Speaker, that burden is exceptionally high. And Madam Speaker, we are seeing and witnessing and experiencing eroding purchasing power. So even as we move closer to a livable wage, which is a recurring chorus of this administration, the reality is other factors, some induced by this administration, is stripping away that marginal increase in purchasing power. Madam Speaker, we expected this budget to offer practical solutions, such as measures to reduce the impact, Madam Speaker, of housing insecurity. Every week, those of us who have constituents, Madam Speaker, we are dealing with constant requests for rental assistance. Some persons who have moved multiple times in the course of one calendar year. And Madam Speaker, businesses in our community are crying out for help so that there is an ease of doing business in this country. Madam Speaker, and many of our people are laboring under the intense weight of high electricity bill.
Yes, sir.
Madam Speaker, and by and large, the present pressure that Bahamians are facing, they are facing, Madam Speaker, in large measure because of ill-advised decisions by this administration. The member for Fort Charlotte, in collaboration with the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, made a terrible calculation, Madam Speaker, in not continuing the hedge. And Madam Speaker, that resulted in those fluctuating prices in the world market negatively affecting our fuel bill in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. It resulted in a 163% increase in fuel charge. And Madam Speaker, if it wasn't bad enough that they made the wrong decision to cancel the hedge, they made a worse decision, Bahamians would say worse decision, to conceal the bad decision that they made. And then, Madam Speaker, we watch it played out in the front of national attention where they played the blame game and the shaggy game. They didn't remember. It wasn't me. And the member for Fort Charlotte, in less than 11 minutes, eight separate times, he told an untruth in this place that he didn't know, only to be forced to admit later when there was irrefutable evidence. Those high electricity bills that the Bahamian people are experiencing is the Davis-Cooper bill on the backs of Bahamians, Madam Speaker. Our children, Madam Speaker, deserve quality education and facilities that empower them to reach their full potential. Madam Speaker, no doubt strides have been made under the present minister, Madam Speaker, but she is, in fact, carrying a baton that was passed to her, Madam Speaker, and the incredible work that she is doing now, Madam Speaker, let us not be revisionists of Bahamian history. Jeff Lloyd also did good work while he was in the chair, Madam Speaker. Contrary to what I heard during these debates, Madam Speaker, substantial funding was also spent, Madam Speaker, was spent during the 2 years of the pandemic as well, Madam Speaker. So all have contributed to the welfare of our Bahamian people, Madam Speaker. Infrastructure in health, Madam Speaker, is deeply challenged, Madam Speaker. Our infrastructure must be modernized and expanded to support economic development and improve the quality of life. Madam Speaker, none of us have a monopoly on loving the Bahamas, Madam Speaker, or doing well for the Bahamian people. Some would try to convince the Bahamian people that they have a monopoly, but they do not. They do not. Madam Speaker, the FNM has always stood for accountability, transparency, and good governance. Unfortunately, this budget fails to address the pressing need for greater accountability and transparency in government. Madam Speaker, it is crucial for the Bahamian people to have confidence that their tax dollars, once collected, will be used wisely. They expect to see robust measures to enhance transparency, to eliminate wasteful spending, and to ensure that public officials are held to the highest standard of integrity. Yes. Madam Speaker, members opposite would like us to shut up. You hear it constantly, even now. And they don't want us to critique their performance and advocate for a better future. However, Madam Speaker, we are duty-bound to raise our voice on behalf of our people, to share our unique views of where the country should go. They cannot silence us, Madam Speaker. We are calling for an inclusive society. We wish to be supportive for sensible propositions when they put it forward, because we are working towards a prosperous future for all. And Madam Speaker, despite their grumbling, interruptions, and statements made that are most unkind, we will continue, Madam Speaker, to fight for the welfare and progress of the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, this is the least tribalistic team this House has ever seen. Madam Speaker, we have not gone back into antiquity, into ancient history, into past PLP iterations to point out a litany of scandals. We haven't done that. This team, Madam Speaker, they wish for us to be quiet while they savage the free national movement from pre-independence into independence and beyond. But we stay focused. We stay focused on the issue, not seeking to savage those that have retired from politics, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, we are here today to represent our people. The Prime Minister, in his budget communication, Madam Speaker, sought to quote selectively from the IMF most recent World Economic Outlook report. Madam Speaker, the report was released in April of 2023. And when he spoke, he referred to an uncertain and challenging economic climate on the global stage. But, Madam Speaker, it really said more than that. The report, Madam Speaker, had as a subtitle, A Rocky Recovery. Madam Speaker, this very aptly characterizes the state of the global economy as they saw it. In Chapter 1 of that report, Madam Speaker, it summarizes the medium-term prospects of the world economy. And here's what it says. Tentative signs in early 2023 are that the world economy would achieve a soft landing. With inflation coming down and growth steady. Although, however, Madam Speaker, inflation has declined as central banks have raised interest rates and food and energy prices have come down, underlying price pressures are proving sticky. They went on to say, Madam Speaker, that risks to the outlook are heavily skewed to the downside, with the chances of a hard landing having risen sharply. In layman terms, the IMF is signaling that they are no longer confident that the world can avoid the prospect of a hard economic landing, given the persistent high inflation and the strong policy measures employed by governments and central banks to counter the same. Madam Speaker, in simple terms, this means that the chances of low or no growth of the world economy is much more likely than had been hoped for. Madam Speaker, I'm making this point for the simple reason that this government has a terrible habit of overstating the case, of painting a rosy picture when mature, serious leadership would have a serious and mature conversation with the population about what we face as a nation. Madam Speaker, the IMF slashed projected growth rates for the major economies for 2023, 2024, and beyond. The IMF and others did this, but the Davis-led administration didn't. It was not in their interest to paint a realistic picture, so instead they sought to paint a rosy picture, Madam Speaker. And the question naturally is, why would a government do this? Madam Speaker, the side opposite has this unfortunate bad habit of trying to rewrite history. They came to office with an economy that, according to the National Statistical Institute, was already growing at double digits. You remember when they said they inherited, the Prime Minister himself said, they inherited an economy that was in recession. Madam Speaker, it is, according to our own institution, it is a blatant untruth. Madam Speaker, the economy was already opening. The world, again, was already opening. And there was pent-up demand. And, of course, there was the impact of policies already left in place by the F&M administration. And so, Madam Speaker, if we want to get into the conversation of babies, clearly, when the test was done, and the test was for who owned the recovery, whose baby was it, I must inform the Progressive Liberal Party, in the case of a recovering Bahamian economy, PLP, you are not the daddy or the mummy. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister only discontinued telling that story when the Free National Movement and the media called him out on it. Madam Speaker, I'd like to make two very critical points, which together explain why the government fiscal and budgetary projections are entirely off base. And, Madam Speaker, could put at risk the medium and long-term economic prospects of the Bahamas. The first point, Madam Speaker, I'd like to make is that the rapid increase in real economic growth are in large measure a result of what I just outlined. Pent-up demand, policies left in place. But the second point is really where I want to go, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when you listen to this government, and I want to be very clear on this point, when you listen to them, the reason it is important for them to paint a picture that they have worked miracles is because it allows them to get this public to be more accepting of the kind of reckless, unwise spending that they are engaged in. If people believe money is flowing, they can accept for a moment maybe why this government is flossing in the midst of challenging times for so many families. Madam Speaker, we ought to celebrate our history, to be proud of having arrived here at 50 years. But Madam Speaker, some of the excesses, Madam Speaker, it begs the question. It begs the question, why are we not prioritizing our spending in light of the challenges? Just yesterday, a member in this House made the point that in his constituency, many of his constituents are still battling with outside toilets, Madam Speaker. How much does it take to buy a toilet, a pedestal, to dig a septic tank? Madam Speaker, I lived in Fox Hill for years, and we did it. There wasn't a home around that did not have an inside bathroom, that we did not work together as a community with the help of Mr. Simonet as well. We got persons to come on board and contribute to changing people's lives. Madam Speaker, and so Madam Speaker, it is important for us to be wise in our spending. Madam Speaker, yet even though the economy was reflated, this administration is still projecting high real GDP growth for the upcoming 2 fiscal periods. Madam Speaker, they are projecting 8.9% and 4.2%, both of which are well above our customary real economic growth rates. This rosy picture, Madam Speaker, rosy projections, Madam Speaker, is what underpins the government hopeful 400 million plus increase in revenue. And Madam Speaker, again, there are so many factors that affect recovery. Ability and willingness to reform state-owned enterprises, well, we know they're on that run. In fact, they're using state-owned enterprises as employment agencies, Madam Speaker, and we want our people to be employed. But we also want to make sure that what we do today is sustainable tomorrow, Madam Speaker. Because on the front end, you could make one decision that has unintended bad consequences on the back end, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have an opportunity, Madam Speaker, in this 50th year of our independence to do something different as a nation, Madam Speaker. It is our intention to be distinctly different from them, Madam Speaker. That's why when I was in agriculture, we believe, Madam Speaker, that packing houses should be in the hands of farmers and producers organizations. That's why we believe a feed mill should be in the hands of private operators, a group of farmers with those persons who have skills to manage it. That's what we believe, Madam Speaker. They believe that they should be in charge of all of these institutions where they can hide the wastage when it comes, and invariably the wastage comes, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, this government is insisting on restraint by the Bahamian population, but they do not know how to exercise restraint. Madam Speaker, it would require serious and sober governance to do so. And you know they are at conflict. The few that are minded to be fiscally prudent don't have a strong voice in that administration, Madam Speaker. In fact, many of them learn about key financial decisions of this government. They learn about it in the press like most of us, because it's being made elsewhere, Madam Speaker. It's being made elsewhere. When the first fiscal strategy report was laid in this place, they hadn't seen it, Madam Speaker. Hadn't seen it. They hadn't seen the cuts to their respective ministries, Madam Speaker. Hadn't seen it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, discipline requires that they make a commitment to pursuing cost containment and efficiencies across the public sector. not committed to it, Madam Speaker. That's why you have $135 million being spent on consultants that they are unprepared to tell us who they are, where they're deployed, and what work they are doing on behalf of the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker. Their most favorite strategy of employment is unemploying people they perceive to be F&Ms in order to hire folks who are nipping at their heels, because I understand there are folks restless. They have been promised many things. They have been promised many things, and they have not been able to deliver. So the best way to deliver is fire some folks they believe are FNMs, Madam Speaker. They lack restraint. It would mean, Madam Speaker, if they exercise restraint, fewer large delegations, less partying, less cocktail receptions, less contracts for extravagant and unnecessary events, Madam Speaker. It would mean less consultancies for political folks who are doing political work while on government pay, Madam Speaker, hiring murderers, Madam Speaker. But because the PLP refuses to take its governance responsibility seriously, they have, in my view, overinflated the prospects for real.
The chair recognizes.
Sorry, is it a point of order?
It's a point of order.
Hiring murderers.
I said mouth murderers. That's what I said. No. Let me rephrase it for you. No problem. Hiring persons who would use their mouths to inflict pain, embarrassment, savagery on other Bahamians while they are on the pay. Okay? Madam Speaker, this administration, Madam Speaker, needs to be focused on the serious business of empowering Bahamians. Madam Speaker, there's a sacrilegious statement that they often use about that they will dry every tear from every eye. I believe it is drawn from the scripture, Revelation. And in Revelation, it was talking about the Master, the only being that has the capacity to dry every tear from every eye. But, Madam Speaker, if they were saying it aspirationally, if they were saying it that their desire is to dry every tear from every eye, that would be one thing. Sorry, what's the point of order? Sorry.
The point of order is that the charge of sacrilege is neither biblically or factually correct. We say we attempt to dry the tear from every eye. That is what God does, and the Bible implores us to try our best to be like Christ. And so to say that we're going to try to do what Christ does is not sacrilegious at all. And so personally, Madam Speaker, the record ought not to let that remain. Everyone should be trying to dry the tear from every eye, knowing that it's something that we will be doing because the poor will always be with us.
Madam Speaker, furthermore, the ill-advised decisions of this administration has resulted in failure of this administration to pay some critical bills. I wonder, Madam Speaker, if that is the reason why Abaco is experiencing the difficulties that they have. We advise, Madam Speaker, it would be wonderful, Madam Speaker, in the wrap-up if they could explain whether or not the two technicians who came to Abaco to deal with the MAN diesel engines, if it was accurate that they were not paid. And as has been done in the past, they simply would decode the machines whenever bills are not paid. We know that there is a money crunch, Madam Speaker, because of some ill-advised decisions, Madam Speaker. And I'll come to BPL in a moment, Madam Speaker, to ask them what is the strategy to fix it. They said in their blueprint for change that they will come in, review, and they expect to lower the cost of electricity. They have done the exact opposite, Madam Speaker. I brought some charts with me today, Madam Speaker. You'll have a chance, Madam Speaker, to see what the prices are, to see the Sayers Davis cost to every Bahamian, most Bahamian families, and of course, Madam Speaker, the businesses. And you can trace it, Madam Speaker, over the 12-month period, Madam Speaker. I spoke to a gentleman recently. His bill, Madam Speaker, this past month was almost $700. He said the last time he could remember a bill even remotely close was during the period just before the hedge was put in place. But, Madam Speaker, we're back there, and we are not even in the heart of summer yet, Madam Speaker. And so we aren't in the height of the summer yet. So, Madam Speaker, many of the constituents in here, their constituents, in fact, they're going to have to spend much of their capital grant trying to help the folks whose electricity bill was elevated by their colleagues, and to borrow their words, they sat in cabinet and didn't mumble a single word as it was happening, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, mums was the word, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they love to tell this untruth about how we just massively elevated the national debt, when in reality, when you look at the actual numbers, Madam Speaker, and you've heard it before in this House, we've pointed out that this team, they love to talk about 20 months, this team has added at least $1 billion. Madam Speaker, with no COVID, with no Dorian, this absolutely brilliant team, as they love to characterize themselves, Madam Speaker, has added to the national debt. And the question is, what accounted for it, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, this budget failed to address the importance, Madam Speaker, of promoting light manufacturing, Madam Speaker. If we are in the midst of a crisis and you are so serious about saving money from the economic leak, we should then set out on a path, Madam Speaker, to unleash the talents of our micro and small businesses by making funds available so that they can manufacture those items that service our tourism sector, Madam Speaker. The light manufacturing industry is more than $1 billion industry. Agriculture, $1 billion, Madam Speaker. And so for all their talk in agriculture, Madam Speaker, I bring some documents today so we can deal with that. All their talk in agriculture, Madam Speaker, ask this side opposite. A country that is importing more than 95% food, whether it's crops or livestock or processed foods, have they in 20 months had a 0.2% impact on the reduction of those imports? I'll answer for them just to save them time. No, they didn't. They didn't. So Madam Speaker, it is important for us to have sober conversations about what we are facing as a country and what we must do in order to fix it. So we didn't get caught up in that kind of childish drama, painting a picture like we're doing a phenomenal job. Phenomenal job where? We're still importing 98+% of every one of those items that they're talking about. Every single one, Madam Speaker. So their productivity is represented by this, Madam Speaker, in this place. That's them. That's as productive, as active as they are in food security. That's as active as they are, Madam Speaker. That's as active as they are, Madam Speaker. So Madam Speaker, the studies we left in place by the IDB, Carlos Pugh, go and research it, by FAO, Madam Speaker, by CARDI, Madam Speaker, all of those agencies that conducted studies, Madam Speaker, they left data to show that we have the capacity as a country, if we work collaboratively in the agriculture space, to save $250 million through import substitution. Growing or producing those things that we could sell competitively to tourists or overseas. But just here alone, 250 million persons, Madam Speaker. So disrespectful that they're carrying on, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are already aware, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, may I have some protection, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, we are already aware, Madam Speaker, of their record as financial managers. They do not have a legacy of good financial managers. In fact, Madam Speaker, the supporters of the Progressive Party, this is why I never demonize any Bahamian. I don't care what your politics is, because we know at least 4, 5, 6% of you will be voting with us the next election. We love you. We love you like cooked food. And we welcome you. R10 is big. We have a problem with the culture of the PLP. We don't have a problem with PLPs. We just have a problem with the culture, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, one good indication of a desperate government who has challenges managing money is that it keeps trying to take your money, whether you are in the insurance business, whether you are a wholesaler or a retailer. Could you imagine the gall of this government? Putting pressure on the insurance sector so that they can spend their money in a manner that they are prescribing in government assets. If they do not want to do so, they should have the right not to do so, Madam Speaker. But they can't strap, Madam Speaker. That's why, Madam Speaker, they brought this amendment to move the reporting of VAT from 21 days to 14 days. They need that thing. They need that little thing. It doesn't matter, Madam Speaker, that in so many ways it is impractical to put that pressure on businesses, given the complications, whether it's with the accountants who service their industry, Madam Speaker, or it is getting all of the documentations lined up in order to submit, Madam Speaker, for a multiplicity of reasons, some expressed by the Chamber of Commerce. This pressure that they are putting on the business community, Madam Speaker, is most unfortunate, Madam Speaker. Again, they are going after funds not just from retailers and wholesale. You know what is offensive to many entrepreneurs and Bahamians? Folks who don't know how to manage or who haven't demonstrated they are managing money properly are trying to take your money so that they can manage it for you. That's a problem, Madam Speaker. The medical supply business, again, another group that this government decide in the absence of consultation to tell them how to do things, Madam Speaker. If this government was as aggressive managing the people's resources as you are going after businesses, this country would be in a far better place. But your aggression is misplaced and misdirected. Madam Speaker, the PLP government's actions have not shown that they are governing for all Bahamians, Madam Speaker. This is not a fairer society. This budget does not accomplish that because we know that there is a narrow group on whose behalf you are governing, Madam Speaker. They have not put in place, Madam Speaker, a comprehensive crime-fighting plan, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they have not, in my estimation, in our estimation, demonstrated that they are prepared to work evenly for all constituencies and constituents. It's not a fair society. Under our administration, Madam Speaker, under our administration, we intend to govern for all Bahamians. So for all of the PLPs, all the PLPs who are out there crying, because the persons who they are giving the funds to ain't letting this money. The member for Tall Pine said plenty money they putting on the road. But I can tell you, this road hungry. So that money ain't trickling down. It's going to some folks who pocket donkey. It's going to some folks who putting on some weight. But the average citizen is not feeling that money they put on the road. I look at the people, I'm listening because when I look at you, sometimes you're not appreciative. So, Madam Speaker, increased revenue was outstripped by uncontrolled spending. Increased revenue was outstripped by uncontrolled spending, which has resulted in an increased deficit and an increase in the national debt. Madam Speaker, this government is failing to lead our nation in a national conversation about putting together careful priorities for our country, Madam Speaker. After Dorian, $3.4 billion. After COVID, another $3.4 to $3.6 billion. Madam Speaker, you would think we would exercise greater discipline, Madam Speaker, but not this administration, Madam Speaker. Some of their own supporters said, when we were in government, they say, listen, you all around here ain't want to spend this money. When we come back in, we gonna bust this money up. They know this party so well, Madam Speaker, because they are busting this money up, Madam Speaker. Millions, Madam Speaker, spent on celebrations, receptions, monogram items, promoting them and their governance, not the country, them and their governance, Madam Speaker. What What about the Royal Bahamas Police Force reserves who are still waiting for that money? That's right. What about the Defense Force veterans who are still waiting on that money? What about the islands that are still waiting on ambulances, Madam Speaker? What about those who are waiting for fire trucks, Madam Speaker? What about my child that's waiting for infrastructural developments for the clinics to be fixed, Madam Speaker? What about the expensive vehicles that are being bought through OPM? I don't know. I just hear the car that's cost in excess of $150,000, closer to $196,000. Say it ain't so. Say it ain't so. While members of the Ministry of Work staff and other staff are struggling to find transportation to inspect properties. Sometimes they have to catch a ride in a client's car, which could lead to reputational damage or to even putting themselves at risk. Meanwhile, we are in air-can-do, exceptionally expensive car like why the other one ain't can do good because it look good to me. I can't even hear it. It's rolling so smooth. Why are we spending money the way we are spending the money? Madam Speaker, Bahamians are stronger in spite of the Progressive Liberal Party. Bahamians are stronger because in large measure we are people with indomitable spirit, Madam Speaker. And just like Angleston, my favorite song is Redemption Song, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, as another hurricane season approaches, we expect this government to use our limited resources to make sure we take care of our people, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are hoping that the Minister of Finance would empower the Minister with responsibility for the DRA so we could bring real help, Madam Speaker, to our people. Again, when we were in government, prior, Madam Speaker, to us demanding office, we, Madam Speaker, repaired 2,600 plus homes, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, some of us, Madam Speaker, we were critical of ourselves. I'm in that number, critical of how we manage some things. But I want to say today, once again, the worst year after Dorian under the Free National Movement was more effective than the best year under the Progressive Liberal Party. Come, lay the documents. Lay the documents. And so, Madam Speaker, I will lay the document to show they have been non-productive, Madam Speaker. Partisan politics, Madam Speaker. Partisan politics, Madam Speaker. That's why, Madam Speaker, as much as we appreciate our brother from West End and Bimini and our sister from Marathon, why was it necessary to release almost every urban renewal worker, Madam Speaker, was not given a chance to serve again? Isn't it incredible? Think about this, Madam Speaker. There are some folks, Madam Speaker, who wasn't making $300, wasn't making $400. And this administration that claimed to love people and aspirationally seek to dry every tear from every eye send some single women home crying because they lost their job, Madam Speaker. We seem not. Are you not touched by the infirmities of our people? Are you not touched by the infirmities of our people? So let me qualify it. Let me qualify it for the pastor that is shouting, but not for God at this moment. Let me qualify it. Let me qualify it. Madam Speaker, stand the spirit. Stand the spirit. Madam Speaker.
Lord.
Madam Speaker.
Lord, get the oil.
Madam Speaker, I was in government.
The oil.
When I served in the Minister's Cabinet, I served for 4.5 years. Well, almost. And so, Madam Speaker, the reason I can talk with authority about tribalism, about nepotism and cronyism and why I'm angry with it, because for all the criticism they level against myself, or against Shannon Dawn Cartwright, or against my colleagues, ask them, for 4.5 years, did I fire somebody out of agriculture and marine resources? Did I fire somebody out of youth sports and culture? Did I move somebody because they were politically identified? Madam Speaker, we are empowered and authorized to talk because we don't behave like that. Now, if there were some others, go penalize them. You have new leadership, and we are not functioning that way, Madam Speaker. So I'm not sure why they want us to be quiet. We will not be quiet. And if we are, even the rocks will cry out. Madam Speaker, we had, Madam Speaker, 1,000, think about this for a moment. Member for Carmichael, 1,000 entrepreneurs. Some maintain graveyards, roadsides. They did a variety of things to transform the face of this country. And think about this for a moment. 1,000 of them, and the vast majority of them were victims, meaning that this administration unemployed them in order to employ some others. Listen, what you do in government is you grow the economy and you absorb people from all political sides. You don't fire one group to put in another group. Right? No, I'm sorry, you're not listening properly. 4.5 years. 4.5 years. You cannot find one person who was fired for 4.5 years. But obviously you're cockeyed. But that's it. So, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker,
That's my apology. Yeah,
Madam Speaker,
I'll strike that from the record.
Which part? The truth is not in me, or he's cockeyed for not seeing the truth?
No, don't say that.
Madam Speaker, good governance must trump politics. Madam Speaker, I can't stress the importance loud enough of good governance, Madam Speaker. It is important for us to demonstrate in these unique positions we've been blessed with. We have to demonstrate that we are prepared to engage in good governance, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me run down a list of things that concern us. In the blueprint for change, this administration promised lower electricity prices. I'll be quick on this. The result is 163% increase in fuel charge, Madam Speaker. A broken promise. When people lose confidence in your word, that went over. Madam Speaker, the second example of a broken promise that they can't seem to redeem, this government, Madam Speaker, promised land reform. They've been in for a while. Now, we will come to this place to discuss some land transactions, not just yet. But, Madam Speaker, we have not seen evidence. Madam Speaker. We have not seen evidence of their commitment to land reform, Madam Speaker. We believe, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister will be entirely too busy. Madam Speaker, by the grace of God, in 2026, when I become the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Madam Speaker, I intend to make sure that there is a subcommittee of cabinet, along with public servants, Madam Speaker, who will be in charge of addressing the land issues, Madam Speaker. Land reform is critical, Madam Speaker. This administration promised it, but we are no closer to resolving the issue of commonage land, of ensuring that entrepreneurs have fee simple title to their property, Madam Speaker. We are no closer, Madam Speaker, in terms of the mapping exercise, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, the third promise that they made that they have broken, Madam Speaker, is they have not demonstrated a commitment to helping Bahamians take greater advantage of their natural resources. They talk a good talk. In fact, Madam Speaker, if you go in the dictionary right now, the PLP has been so attached to this term patrimony, you'll see several members opposite face in the dictionary. They love patrimony. They seek to convince people that their love for this country is irreversibly greater than everybody else, Madam Speaker. But why, Madam Speaker, are they not engaged in the exercise, Madam Speaker, of valuing resources, Madam Speaker, monetizing the resources, Madam Speaker, bringing investment from overseas and within the country to add value to those resources, Madam Speaker, and selling it locally and on the global stage to create greater ownership for Bahamians, Madam Speaker. Why they're not engaged in that process, Madam Speaker? The fourth area, Madam Speaker.
Point of order. The chair recognizes
Thank you
the
for your
honourable member for
theatrics.
South
Thank you.
and Central
Madam
Andros.
Speaker, a point of order is clarification on what the member is saying. We actually have a land reform committee that's being formed. We're actually reviewing the legislation right now, and in short order, we'll do the consultation. What we don't do is force anything on people. We actually send it through the process, Madam Speaker. So thank you for the good member. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, they also have a committee to deal with the issue of unregulated development. We heard them talk about it ad nauseum earlier today. But Madam Speaker, while we were in this debate, while we were in this budget debate, more homes were built in Abaco. More homes were built in Eleuthera and Exuma, unregulated homes. So if you want to convince us that you are serious, get organized so that while you're talking about demolishing shanty towns, you would be in a position to stop new homes from being built in shanty towns. If you can't stop houses now, we have very little confidence that you're going to deal with that issue later. So all that is talk. So yes, you have a committee, God bless you. Unfortunately, the committee does not result in the kind of action that we need. Madam Speaker, this is the same crew that said that my colleagues said, Madam Speaker, that they are committed to small business development. But Madam Speaker, we have dared them to find the $50 million in last year's budget. Madam Speaker, we've been searching. It's hard to find $10 million in this budget. So again, we are saying that if in fact you are committed to small businesses, don't sing it, as we say in Jangano, bring it. Until that day, you should be mums is the word on that side. So, Madam Speaker, broken promises cause loss of confidence, Madam Speaker. This team, Madam Speaker, made a commitment to improve the ease of doing business. Single-handedly, this administration has heaped more pressure and difficulties on the back of the Bahamian people who are in business than any other administration in the history of the Bahamas. Every time businesses look around, there is a new pressure this administration lowers on their back. If you're in insurance business, you've had two blows in recent months. If you're in the retail business, again, we have litigated that story over and over. In fact, so bad is the treatment that even the Prime Minister has admonished the gatekeepers to say, you all ease up on the businesses. You have to do it with decency and respect. Isn't that incredible? In the ministry that he runs when he's in town. And so again, the Prime Minister has had to ask colleagues to slow your roll, ease up. So what we're saying in essence is, it is absolutely important for you to improve the ease of doing business. Listen, business is fleeing to other jurisdictions because successive administrations have not done sufficient to make it easier to open a bank account. We have not made it easier to simply demonstrate that this is a rules-based society, that when somebody's coming to do business here, they should be able to see a list of requirements on how you open a company, how you make inroads in terms of getting established, and that they don't have to go and find a politician in order to do business. Now, we left in place a template on how you could get this done. So when I heard the conversation from the gentleman in charge of digitization, I was not in the House at the time. I just smiled to myself because the work that my successor is carrying out, we began the work, Madam Speaker, in terms of ensuring that we had e-agriculture, and Kwesi Thompson, the member for East, worked diligently on the digitization of the public service. In fact, we were able to hold cabinet meetings online, Madam Speaker. We were able to ensure that businesses can interact with various ministries online, that citizens can do the same. So we were on our way. We just now need, having passed the baton, quite reluctantly, to them, we need them to continue the work, Madam Speaker. And they are not moving at the pace required, Madam Speaker. It makes no sense. It makes no sense, Madam Speaker, for us to have to go to multiple ministries to give the same information as opposed to us being able to deposit that information in the system, and only persons who need to have access to it can go ahead and access it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we were titillated for almost a year by this administration talking about the future of NIB. And it's a problem. Every time a minister mentions a course of action that they will take, the Prime Minister says, no, that's not going to happen. Because, you know, sometimes leaders have a propensity to be popular, and so they don't want to make tough, good decisions sometimes, so they'll defer it. But every decision he has deferred has come to pass. I mean, it's scriptural. So he talked about electricity. In fact, they illegally took out some actions to pass subsidies on, in fact, loan funds to BPL. And then try to hide the fact that they loaned the funds to BPL, only to find that they cash strapped, so they have to claw the money back, Madam Speaker. The same thing is true about NIB. No, we're not going to fool with NIB. Now it's been announced, but open-ended announcement, by the way, that rates will in fact increase next year. But there was no discussion, Madam Speaker, about how will we stop fraud in NIB. How will we collect the funds from those business persons who, Madam Speaker, have already collected money from employees and have not repatriated it to the government? How will we enforce the law around NIB? When will government ministries pay back the money that they borrow? Madam Speaker, these are the kinds of things people who are being asked to dig deeper in their pocket, they want to know. I think reasonable people understand we have to save NIB, and that's what so we support saving it. But we want to save it and understand that there's a holistic plan in order to deal with it. And unfortunately, this administration loves to deliver, here's the big problem, here is our narrow, linear solution, but without looking comprehensively at what the issue is. And so Madam Speaker, we are concerned. Madam Speaker, we propose that the government do the following. One, the Prime Minister should cancel the appointment of any minister, chairman, ambassador, or consultant who has failed to eliminate their or their company's NIB arrears, despite officials attempting to settle the matter. Is there anyone who's appointed who's in country or overseas who still owes the government hundreds of thousands of dollars, and are we aiding and abetting them by leaving them with such appointments? Two, the Prime Minister should highlight the steps his administration intends to take to ensure timely provision of benefits. NIB should be bullish in collecting funds from employees who are holding out on turning their employees' money over. So, Madam Speaker, I've mentioned several provisions that NIB should look at. One of them also is that NIB should invest funds in a conservative manner. There's no funds that you want to get into digital currency with. And again, and I'm not suggesting that you've done that. But quite frankly, you don't reveal anything, so we don't know. But the bottom line is we have to be conservative in terms of how we manage the people's money, Madam Speaker. So despite this administration claims of safeguarding the nation's progress at establishing fiscal stability, we find a striking absence of comprehensive approach to fulfill these promises, Madam Speaker. Let me just share a couple of things. One, this administration has consistently violated the Debt Management Act, specifically Section 16.1, 16.2, and 17, as evidenced by their engagement in illegal loans. Illegal loans. As they have loaned, Madam Speaker, in the Ministry of Housing took out a $20 million loan, according to what was reported here in this House, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the fact that the minister is a corporate soul, nothing in their regulations or act authorizes them to take out a loan. It is an illegal loan, Madam Speaker. This administration is engaging in a series of public-private partnerships, and we support public-private partnerships. We support it so much that we wrote a policy document. I've laid a copy of it in this House. So at least you know, here are the parameters in which you have to operate when you're doing a PPP. And so, Madam Speaker, the question is, this administration is committed to PPPs as well, and we don't have a problem with it. Most of the contractors, we understand, are exceptional, no problem. Our problem is we don't understand the terms. We don't know what the parameters are within which persons are doing business with the government. And so the government is duty bound to report the particulars, since you haven't shared the policy document. And the reality is you don't follow the procurement law. Again, Madam Speaker, breaking the law. This administration that has a penchant for prosecution also has a penchant for being serial lawbreakers. The same administration that has a penchant for prosecution, the same administration that has a penchant for prosecution are serial lawbreakers, violating the Debt Management Act, violating the Housing Act, violating the Central Bank Act. Madam Speaker, when we were here previously, Madam Speaker, and we had a wonderful conversation about this. We were debating an amendment to the Central Bank Act. During that time, the case was made that there was no loan taken out. And my good cousin from Ragged Island got up and he waxed eloquently. I mean, to be quite, he's a brilliant man. Madam Speaker. But despite everything he said, precisely, Madam Speaker, and he is right. All of what he said went over my head, and I just landed on the truth. And the truth is that this government, out of desperation, drew down on the special drawing rights from the central bank, converted to about $174 million. Madam Speaker, fate would have it that the central bank audited accounts listed the funds as a loan. You going for more verbiage? The bottom line is, Madam Speaker, the central bank just recently audited accounts, listed it as a loan. So, Madam Speaker, serial lawbreakers. They violated the Electricity Act, Madam Speaker. They violated the Road Traffic Act, Madam Speaker. They have violated, Madam Speaker, the Procurement Act. Listen, but I must say, the Progressive Liberal Party is consistent, Pastor. They're so consistent that not only did they violate the Procurement Act that they met in place by the Free National Movement, they also violated the Procurement Act that they amended. So you all are equal opportunity offenders. Equal opportunity offenders. Violated it under you and violated it under us, and now you're violating it under yourself. I want to say, Madam Speaker, as I'm hearing the background noise. I'm from a member who I never clapped so much for today, and the parents was here, so I was at my best behavior. I was clapping for them. I only wish they would return the courtesy. So, Madam Speaker, let me say, Madam Speaker, the consistency with which they break the law is sending the wrong message locally and internationally. Madam Speaker, I'd like for us to really listen carefully, because I want to be careful with this. Madam Speaker, I believe that we should go out of our way to empower Bahamians. So I want to say that. But the way in which we do it must not compromise the law. Madam Speaker, on this issue of the violation of the Procurement Act. Madam Speaker, there have been reports in the public domain recently. You are on three-piece suit today. Madam Speaker, there are reports in the public domain regarding two significant contracts awarded by the Ministry of Transport earlier this year. Madam Speaker, and this was triggered as I listened today, and I just thought, well, maybe I should ask the Prime Minister some questions. One contract, Madam Speaker, is worth $3.35 million and was awarded to a company for software development in the Port Department. The other contract, Madam Speaker, amounts to $3.57 million annually, and that was given to another company for the maintenance and the upkeep of navigational aids. Madam Speaker, mobilization fees exceeding $1 million was sought, I'm advised, for both contracts. Well, again, I believe when the answers come, we'll find out if that was accurate. Interestingly enough, Madam Speaker, there was no public announcement or press release regarding these substantial contracts. Considering the excessive public relations machinery of the government, it is rather puzzling why there was no communication about these significant projects. Madam Speaker, this raises questions relative to the contracts and why the government has not officially publicized them, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Elizabeth.
Madam Speaker, I spoke to both of those projects in my ministry that went through the absolutely transparent procurement policy of the Procurement Act, which does not require PR and marketing. Once the projects are approved by cabinet and everything is executed after being vetted by the Attorney General's office, then the minister either can do a communication or the minister can speak to that in their budget contribution or whatever speech is relevant to the actual project. So he is referring to the Procurement Act and trying to whip in things that were put in the public and not supposed to, because he wants to find a way to put it in his speech. But he can't hit me where he needs to, because the Procurement Act was followed. It does not ask for PR and marketing. I'm sorry if he wanted more PR with my face on it. I can't help him there. But I followed the Procurement Act.
Thank you, honourable member.
Madam Speaker, let me just say for the record that under no circumstances I would hit you. I'm a gentleman. I would not do that. But let me say, Madam Speaker, I was saying earlier, Madam Speaker, that the contract for the software development at the port, Madam Speaker, the tender for this project was posted on the government's procurement portal, according to the information available on the portal. Madam Speaker, the contract went out for tender in September of the previous year and was awarded in February of the current year. What is peculiar, Madam Speaker, is that the government's own portal lists the winning bidder as Infrasoft Technologies, an Indian company now known as Kia.ai. However, when one clicks on the related tab for the contract winner detail, it states that the contract was not awarded to Infrasoft Technology, but to a company with another name. Therefore, according to the government's published information, the Indian company that won the bid did not receive the contract. Madam Speaker, we attempted to research the company that supposedly won the bid. We weren't able at that time to find a website, but I'm sure one could be furnished. We didn't find a LinkedIn page as well, or any information in the social media platform, Madam Speaker. These circumstances, Madam Speaker, is what prompted the questions that are being raised. Why was the contract not awarded to the winning bidder? We don't have a problem. The company that got it, God bless them. I'm happy for them, but we're worrying about the process. A project of this magnitude, Madam Speaker, would have required scrutiny by the tenders board. What decision did the tenders board reach? Did the company submit a bid during the formal bidding process? Why did the government award a substantial contract to a company that, well, on the face of it, we don't know what the track record is in this particular area, Madam Speaker? How did the government determine the capabilities of the company in terms of previous projects that it had done, both scope and size? How many technical staff does the company have? How many similar projects has the company undertaken? Is the company merely outsourcing the work, or are they executing it themselves? Madam Speaker, there are a number of questions that we believe are important and should be answered. Madam Speaker, we expect this administration, with its claim and commitment to accountability and transparency to provide satisfactory responses to these questions. The government, by virtue of not following, in this case, back to what we're talking about, the procurement law, exposes this company to reputational damage and potential legal challenges by the government, not the company, by the government not being transparent. There is a process that I just went through. Clearly, that process was not followed. On the contract for an annual payment of $3.57 million for the navigational aids, there is nothing we could locate in the government's portal regarding a bidding process for what is a $3.5 million contract per year, unless we've misread it. Certainly, as required by law, this must have been subject to competitive bid. If this $3.5 million sum is an annual figure, how much is the entire value of the contract? How many years is the contract for? Again, what is the track record of the company in this doing a project of this size? How many bids were received and analyzed? What did the tenders board decide with respect to this contract? Did the vendor win the bid? And of course, the other question is this a multi-year bid, and for how many years? Madam Speaker, we read it when we did it and when you did it. We are not surprised, Madam Speaker, by the government's lack of action in this matter, but we are hopeful that they will address these issues, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, our preference, Madam Speaker, is that Bahamian companies secure these contracts while they are available. Our desire is never to disadvantage many of the entrepreneurs who are trying to ensure that they are owners in this country. Therefore, this discussion, Madam Speaker, is about the process and the integrity of the system, which this government consistently tells the world that they are the poster child for accountability and transparency. Madam Speaker, we're going to come to that deal in just a moment. Just stay tuned. Madam Speaker, the provisions of the Procurement Act of 2023, which are crucial in this discussion, closely resemble those that were in the previous act that we had. And Madam Speaker, this administration didn't follow the old one, and they're consistent. They ain't following the one that they passed themselves, Madam Speaker. Serial lawbreakers. So even if it isn't enforced, you have one that was enforced and you didn't follow that. Madam Speaker, you could get technical all you want. It ain't gonna happen today. Madam Speaker, as per section of the Act, the summary details of all eligible procurement contracts must be published in the newspapers and on the government's procurement portal within 60 days. Regrettably, this requirement was not fulfilled for the mentioned contracts, and it seems that the PLP government has no interest in adhering to this obligation for any contract. Madam Speaker, I would leave this particular category of questions because I know that this side opposite is unaffected by it. Because like with the Bermuda trip, that did not alter the way this government followed, went in, took government money for a private political trip, and came back still talking about transparency and accountability as if the public was not aware of what you just did before and after you got off the plane. Madam Speaker, the Debt Management Act, Madam Speaker, is yet another one of those acts that this government continues to violate. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister mentioned that in the case of the Central Bank Act, that he did not and they did not violate it. Their attorneys just had a difference of opinion. Now, here's something relative to the Debt Management Act that I'm curious what their answer will be. Madam Speaker, the deficit of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas once again has been delivered by this government, and they happen to be $110 million short. $110 million short. If you are a cashier in a mom and pop store and you are consistently wrong, $20 off, over a period of 3 or 4 weeks, the chances of you keeping your job is slim to none. But this administration have been wrong on the deficit. The Prime Minister wasn't sure if the deficit had gone up or if it had gone down. The Prime Minister released to us deficit figures in his communication, only for us to find out, after looking, Madam Speaker, after looking at government-owned accounts, that they had not counted $110 million. Madam Speaker, the improper accounting of expenditure has directly affected the deficit, which now stands at $520 million. $520 million. And Madam Speaker, it is absolutely shameful that this administration would seek to conceal this from the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me turn my attention, Madam Speaker, to the area of taxes. This administration, Madam Speaker, indicated that they would not introduce any new tax. I believe my colleagues, Madam Speaker, has litigated this sufficiently, so I'm not going to dwell on the issue. But I'll just quote the Prime Minister. He said that 95% of the taxes and fees and increases were on foreigners. So by his own admission, at least 5% new tax was on Bahamians. I think 5% makes it a tax, which rules out his earlier claim of no new tax. So, Madam Speaker, this administration, apart from introducing, contrary to what they said, new taxes, this administration also, Madam Speaker, has raised fees in a number of areas. One of the provisions that, Madam Speaker, we will vote against when we look at the amendments is one where this government wishes to give the minister authority to impose what we know to be a tax on sugary drinks. Madam Speaker, we believe any tax that they are going, any tax that they're going to introduce at any point in the future, they need to bring it here in the House. It's a money bill, and we want to have an opportunity to discuss it. But we're not going to participate in the same way we were not going to aid and abet this administration in retroactively covering up what they did with an illegal loan with Central Bank. We will not be party to doing that as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I refer now to the Passenger Tax Amendment Bill 2023, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in this bill, the government seeks to do several things. One, increase taxes on cruise passengers visiting Nassau, Freeport, and Bimini by a whopping 67%, Madam Speaker, from $18 to $30. Two, increase taxes on cruise passengers visiting private islands by a whopping 83%, from $18 to $33. Three, increase the taxes on all passengers, including Bahamians, traveling in and out of the Bahamas. That's the one that slipped through, that the PM missed. Madam Speaker, we don't have a problem with cruise passengers paying more. It would be good to know whether or not the government examined whether or not, after they look at best practices in all jurisdictions, whether or not this was an appropriate decision, Madam Speaker. And did you give them time, Madam Speaker, to make the adjustment? Because at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, let me say that whenever you impose a tax on, in this case, the cruise ship, those persons who are coming in the short to medium term have already paid. So you're asking the cruise ships to absorb the cost. Now, one of the reasons I believe you know, again, I like the idea when cruise ships pay a little bit more, because I know in our waters there have been some acts that have been carried out that have been concerning and worrisome. But we also believe it is important that we look at the process that we are using in case we are unleashing unintended consequences, Madam Speaker. And so, again, the cruise ships will no doubt need to a period of time to inform. They need consultation on a period of time so that they can advise their customers. And if this comes into force when it is projected to come into force, we are asking them really to eat the cost. And I trust that the government has taken a look at this. I trust that they've been advised properly by the former Minister of Tourism from West End and Bimini on all the implications of the decision that they have been considering. Did they ask your opinion, West End and Bimini? My apologies. I should not have done that. I should ask Angleton. Did they ask your opinion or what is going on? Okay, no, they're out of order. They're completely out of order in that regard. So again, Madam Speaker, the government has to recognize that throwing out this line that, well, we tax all the foreigners, you know, it's really an interesting argument, as if it is ill-advised, it's not going to bounce back and impact the Bahavian economy. But again, I know it was an attempt to camouflage the fact that they raised taxes or increased fees, even though they had promised not to. Madam Speaker, let me transition to the subject that they like. It's a chorus that they sing on a regular basis on that side. They like to talk about VAT, that we raise VAT to 12%. Madam Speaker, how quickly the PLP forgets. Yes, they were the government, Madam Speaker, that introduced value-added tax. They took it from 0% to 7.5%. Let me say that again. The previous PLP government, of which the member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and St. Salvador was deputy leader, Angleton was there, West End and Bimini was there, Pine Ridge was there, Fort Charlotte was there, and of course, Carmichael was there. They took it up from 0 to 7.5.
They was thinking of 15.
Now let's compare that with what we did. We increased it by 4.5%. And I believe 4.5 is still less than 7.5%. So stop it. Speak the truth. So when you say on one side of your mouth that the last F&M government increased VAT, remember, the increase was 4.5%. Now let me say this. You were actually considering carrying it to 15%. Yes. 15%. And the business community responded, and you moonwalked.
The chair
You
recognizes
backpedaled.
the honourable member for Yamacraw.
Sorry, I yield to three-piece.
Madam Speaker, the members having too much fun. He is getting all of his math wrong. He has a lot of inaccuracies. The F&M administration is a well-known fact that it wasn't 4%. They increased VAT by 60%, 60. So this new math is the first time I'm hearing, and it is wrong, and he need to just correct it or withdraw it.
Listen, I value you, so I'm not going to litigate that further. I would only say from 0 to 7.5 was the PLP. Yes. From 7.5 to 12, we thought was 4.5. Now, I did fail math GCE, but I did pass arithmetic. And I believe my arithmetic today is right. And so I'm not going to draw attention to the fact that you're the Minister of State for Education. So let me say, I'd just like to read something. I'm so sorry I don't have a magnifying glass, but it says, within the proposed package of tax reforms, it is recommended that a VAT be introduced at a rate of 15%, consistent with VAT rates generally charged elsewhere. Such a VAT rate is in combination with other reform proposals would ensure that the government will have access to adequate revenue streams for the future. And this is attributed to the Honorable Michael Alcides, MP and Minister of State for Finance. And this is 2015. I can lay it for you if you're interested in reading it. Yes. So it's okay. I understand. It's painful. It's painful. So again, we've gone through the passenger tax amendment bill, and so, Madam Speaker, I'd like now to transition, Madam Speaker, very briefly. I won't stay on this long because I don't believe in the piling on effect. I don't think it's polite. but the member for Carmichael, it is amazing that sometimes in the moment you could have such a lift, particularly when people are bombing on the desk. But in the final analysis, the figures are not correct. In a different context, however. But so let me say this. Let me say this. Let me say this. Sorry, pardon die. Sorry. So, Madam Speaker, let me just for a moment just speak to the issue raised by the member for Carmichael. Madam Speaker, we listen attentively to presentations made in case there's some information we were not privy to. Madam Speaker, what I found a bit disconcerting about the presentation, Madam Speaker, is that the member seemed to have missed the fact that 49% of the shares was acquired by Bahamians of different stripes. You had preferred as well as ordinary shares. That's a very important point that I thought ought to be made. So it's not just the issue of whether government holds shares. In fact, one way we are different than the Progressive Liberal Party, we really believe that shares should go in the hands of the Bahamian people, and we don't need the government to necessarily hold it in trust for them. So you had a port. You had a port that was in a state that was in a derelict state, right? So again, it's amazing that the figures that were mentioned, and I know the member has gone back and looked at the figures, so I'm sure he doesn't stand by saying that $18 million is what the government of the Bahamas is going to get over 5 years, when some figures have clearly indicated that in one. Okay, no problem. Now, you want to say that on your? I could say you will say that on your feet. Yeah, yes, please. I'll yield. If you want to say, if you want to say, you have some worse things to say. Okay. So, Madam Speaker, let me just say this, and I'll leave this subject because I have some other things I will cover. Madam Speaker, what is this? First of all, we believe the numbers are wrong. But Madam Speaker, what is most disconcerting is that the Prime Minister of the Bahamas and the Deputy Prime Minister of the Bahamas extolled the virtues of this deal. They talked about how powerful it was for the country, how important it was for the development and the revitalization, for the revival of the tourism product. A stunning achievement. So let's just say, for argument's sake, the member for Carmichael is correct. If you are correct, then it is most disconcerting that you are correct and your Deputy Prime Minister and your Prime Minister are wrong. And so the Prime Minister and the Deputy are duty-bound to speak on the record. And from what I saw from the Deputy Prime Minister, he had tremendous amount of hyperboles extolling the virtues of the project. I wasn't in the House. I didn't see whether or not his competitor was smiling or was upset. But let me say this. But the Prime Minister spoke about this project with great enthusiasm. So, and I heard the Minister of Transport during the period when the presentation was being made. And so I'm saying that if all of you are in agreement with the member for Carmichael, it necessarily means you are in disagreement with the prime minister. So I did not hear the member for Yamacraw. So let me. You're correct. So I'm saying that the member for Carmichael. The member for Carmichael flew in the face of the prime minister. In fact, the CEO of the company, the CEO of the company said the deal could not happen were it not for the prime minister. So the member for Carmichael, remember now the PLP is the party that continues to say that we ought to celebrate Bahamian talent and genius. And so it's amazing, the project, the deal was constructed by several Bahamians who are enjoying a very close working relationship with this administration, helping this administration over a number of important hurdles. And yet the member for Carmichael came to this place and said, he didn't say it was a bad deal. He said it was the worst deal in the history of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so I'm going to leave that there. Now, the member for West End and Bimini was actually Minister of Tourism, and he can tell you that, you know, one of the things that happened in the history of that port is that at some point people collecting it was about 70 cents per passenger, and then we moved from 70 cents all the way to $10 when Mr. D'Aguila was in the chair. There was a period where the Progressive Liberal Party had reversed the tax. And moved from, I believe it was 12 all the way down to must be $2. It was after every 1 million customer. And when we came back, we raised it again because we believe that we should get more. So when you start throwing snide remarks that we are in defense of the cruise ship, we'd only remind you of your history in terms of collecting taxes from the cruise ships. So let me move on, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the last few minutes that I have, Madam Speaker, I wish to address this issue of culture. Madam Speaker, I believe the time has come, Madam Speaker, that this administration, in its promotion of the orange economy, invests substantially more funds into culture, into the National Endowment Fund, into the grants program in the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture. Madam Speaker, I've always said, and myself and the member for Central, I've had this conversation many times, from we were in the chair, both of us having been in that ministry and felt that we were hamstrung with no resources or minimal resources. And so now that we are in a position, Madam Speaker, we will ensure that we raise the money that is invested in youth, sports, and culture come 2026 if this administration does not make the decision sooner, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the time has come for a Junkanoo Stadium where Junkanoo could be monetized in a more effective way than it is presently on Bay Street. Now, Madam Speaker, we support, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we support the establishment of a Junkanoo Stadium. But just before we get to that, Madam Speaker, while we were in the chair, you in Cabinet, read the Cabinet conclusion. We got permission while we were in Cabinet, while serving in the Minister's Cabinet, this was approved, to create a multi-purpose Junkanoo shack. We were going to do one in Grand Bahama, one in New Providence. So Madam Speaker, it is our hope that the present Minister of Culture, who we have been, certainly the two ministers who have been in the portfolio before, very supportive of. In fact, we were the forerunners who got a commitment on the $1 million towards a 50-meter swimming pool in Grand Bahama, and we hope you go and get that money. We believe every Junkanoo group shall build a multi-purpose Junkanoo shack, a creation space, a performance space, a cafe of their own, a place where they could record music, etc. And this was approved. So again, you can move with this. And let me go further. We spoke with several of the sponsors of the different groups who were minded to invest money in this. So when I made the presentation, listen, forward ever, backward never. So again, when I made the presentation, we made the point, we made the commitment to move in this direction. So, Brother Bolag, you have an opportunity. If you miss the opportunity, in the not too distant future, we'll help you out. We'll help you out with that. Madam Speaker, we believe that culture, orange economy is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And so we support any effort to ensure that we could build an ecosystem where films can be created in the Bahamas. It isn't about the big mega film. It is about creating content for the small screen. And that is what I'd recommend to the Minister of Tourism, to the Minister of Culture, that in your discussions, you have the right idea when you're talking with networks that buy content, whether it is Netflix, Hallmark, LMNO, etc. And so we believe there's a huge potential, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me also say in the area of culture that we certainly support the establishment of a performing arts school. We only recommend that we look at a tertiary institution that is embedded in the humanities department at UB, that a school for the performing arts. But Madam Speaker, if it's going to be standalone, we will not stand in the way of that either. We believe that it's an idea whose time has come, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are creatives on this side, you know, and so we are creatives on this side. So, Madam Speaker, inflation is real. We are disappointed that the Prime Minister did not use this opportunity in this budget to address inflation and what measures he intends to put in place to address this particular issue. The budget should be about lessening the hardship of Bahamians. And I thought, I heard the comment, I heard the ideas that were shared. And again, we believe that he missed an opportunity. I really believe that if we engage the member for Exuma and Ragged Island more often, you know, he had a great deal to say when he was in opposition, and some of it made sense. But it seemed that since you all have come to power, you all don't ask him anymore. And so it's most unfortunate. I think you should use all members of your team in order to do a good job for the Bahamian people. But Exuma, we want you to know there's space for you on this side. So if ever you decide to come, depending on what happened in the November convention, you know, I just want you to know there's room here. I assure you I can still be in place. So, let me say this. We have concerns about the absence of a comprehensive crime plan. We heard the member for Freetown talk about the amount of officers that were hired, and we commend you. I think it's a good thing when you can hire more officers so we have more persons available to address this vexing issue of crime. But what we do not want you to get trapped with input, hiring police officers, and output, more of them on the beat. But the outcome is the figures are still going up. So we should be focused on outcome. Well, you can tell that story. I can just tell you, we are deeply concerned. I believe that this administration has an opportunity to call together in a crime commission. It's been recommended by all your stakeholders. Let us form a crime commission that have persons from different disciplines that can work in tandem with each other to come up with strategies to deal with prevention, with interdiction, enforcement in general, and rehabilitation. We also believe that all of us in here who represent constituencies know who the senior men and women are on the street. We know the folks in this place who are responsible for at least many of these young folks who are wreaking havoc on our street. I believe it is important. Hey, listen to me. If you represent an inner city community in here, you know who works in the formal and the informal sector. And so I believe it is important that we pull together those persons and put them in a room to discuss the issues that's causing the lives of our young people. We have an opportunity to make a difference. The member for St. Barnabas and myself submitted recommendations to your administration. We remain as a team ready and willing and able to work with this administration so that we can come up with a comprehensive plan so that we can engage persons, stakeholders in our inner city community in order to address the scourge of crime. So again, Madam Speaker, as I wrap up my presentation, Madam Speaker. Oh, this is wonderful. I'll put two of these back up here. Madam Speaker, one of the recommendations that we made, I've already mentioned, but we believe that we should work closely with faith-based organizations who have tremendous influence in our inner city community and help to resource them. It is tragic that many of them, again, who are willing to use their halls as community centers, have not found that governments have been willing to invest in the space, even during hurricane. That was an issue. Many of them could not get their properties repaired after they had housed persons as a shelter. So we can't just go and have a conversation with them. We should go with resources. We should divert some of the resources from where it's going now to empower faith-based organizations on a regular basis. The second thing that we recommend, Madam Speaker, that we ask police officers to, on a regular basis, team up. I know you go into prison, you have a number of programs that are in the prison, but one of the groups that are not a part of that captive audience are young men between the age, and young women now, 17 and 29. They're not a part of the school groups, which is the easiest audience to go to. They haven't been arrested yet, so you could meet them in alternative sentencing. But we have to meet our young people where they are. And it means going out into the community and interacting with them. Sometimes you're not even in uniform, but building relationships. Building relationships. Well, I mean, all of us have friends and relatives who are on the police force. I mean, so again, we're only making recommendations. Everything don't have to be a debate. Again, we also believe that it's important to eliminate the habitat where criminality flourishes, including eliminating derelict cars, dilapidated houses, overgrown lots, and the spots where persons who become criminals gather. I listen very carefully to Marathon. Let me give you the critique. One is, we often clear these both administrations have done it. Certainly we won't do it when we're in the chair. We clear properties and allow the properties a few weeks, a few months to grow back up. When you clear the properties, why don't you convert it into a permanent green space? Why don't you, through eminent domain, acquire the property? And don't say, yo, come, this us now. This is Parker. I'm just saying, let's for a moment just pause. We should change these properties and change even the look of the inner city. This business of paying the fella for the heavy equipment so you get a temporary contract, and when the rainy season comes, it grow back. It's a waste of money and it doesn't do anything for the community in the final analysis. And when you clear a property, block the entrance so that people don't park the derelict vehicle on it immediately thereafter. The other thing is, convert some of these buildings into craft centers so that people can have livable spaces at home instead of doing all their straw work in the front room, all of the other things that artisans and artists do. And convert it. If the Minister of Agriculture was here, I'd say create some processing centers that ISO certified that they could do jams, jellies. We do small theaters in the inner city area. There are things we can do with these dilapidated buildings that we are not doing with the buildings now. And so I encourage the government, you are in the chair, you have an well, let me just say, we own a building on Gambia Drive in Grand Bahama, so we ain't just talking this, that we are converting into a tech center, own the building. And so again, and it's being converted, we want the port to move faster, which I'll come to as I close. Again, so we're not just suggesting things, Elizabeth, that we're not doing. We're just saying, well, the truth is the ideas work because I back here in the house. So all I'm saying is, all I'm saying, right, is that we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to do something different. Wherever you are, you could serve, opposition or government. And so again, that's a recommendation. Again, I'll table the speech. So there are a whole host of recommendations we'd like to make, and we are prepared to work with the minister. But we can't pass off transforming the community to ensure that people are not criminalized. We can't pass it off to the police. The police is a small part of law enforcement. National security, in conjunction with other ministries, has the mandate to come up with a comprehensive, holistic plan for fighting crime. And so that is where we hold you responsible, that you ought to lead the charge in that regard. Let me turn my attention for a moment to the energy question. Madam Speaker, one of the biggest drags on national development is the cost of energy. And so we want to caution this government to be careful not to go down the road to rope this country into very long-term deals where we are further addicted to fossil fuel or heavy fuel, that we should be making the transition to LNG, but more importantly to renewables. So we support the government's initiative of putting $20 million towards green energy, towards solarization. But we believe that so serious is the drag on national development that this government should allocate far more resources to ensuring that we solarize the family islands. When we win the chair, we did it with Ragged Island. We learned some lessons. Ragged Island, the price point, I think none of us would want to see that be the price point for future projects. But we learned it was a project that we set out to do. We accomplished it. And we want to know, what is the government strategy now to, in a very aggressive way, create Bahamian ownership in our family islands? And we can do it through solar. BPL over the next 5 years should not be the corporation that is servicing all of these islands. We should move in the direction where we create other franchises where persons who have the wherewithal can create solar operations and take care of family islands. That's about ownership. That's about transforming Bahamian lives, making multiple millionaires out of Bahamians. We have an opportunity to do it. And so we are encouraging this administration to look at solar. We're also encouraging this administration to fix BPL. We missed an opportunity with the rate reduction bond. You had an opportunity when you came in. You didn't go that route either. So we want to know, what is your strategy? Because what is true is that there is a deteriorating physical plan. We also know that there is a need to ensure that there's ongoing maintenance of all of the physical plan. We know that Abaco is a symptom of what's happening throughout the Bahamas because, one, you don't have sufficient money to maintain all of those things. You are not in a position to retire the legacy debt that exists. And so what is the strategy? We recommend that you look at the model that was left behind when we were kicked out of government and to see whether or not you might find strategic partners locally as a priority, local and international, where we can finance the transformation of BPL. We caution the government that it is important for us to grow the economy so we can employ our people. We should be careful not to use corporations as an employment agency. Now, let me say, when we left, I believe there were 860 persons who were at BPL at the time as a result of the VSAP. We understand that it could be as much as 100 additional persons that have been hired. We don't know, because sometimes people exaggerate, but boy, we keep hearing one figure that's fairly high. And so again, imagine if you have a corporation, if this is accurate, And if I'm not, pardon I. But if it is, think about this. The scarce resources you have, the scarce resources that you have, you are not then going to be able to use to transform BPL. And that's why we're having a lot of the problems. Because many vendors will not do business with the government unless you come with cash. Because they say the government is bad pay. And so if we are serious, we ought to address this energy issue. The Prime Minister missed a wonderful opportunity. I was happy to hear the member for Fort Charlotte comment on other renewable energy sources and looking at thermal. In agriculture, there's biogas, et cetera. We must look at a variety of ways that we are able to generate power and to save our country money. In terms of BPL, we are in support of having a discussion with the government so we could share some ideas. There are a lot of Bahamians who have indicated they have been reaching out, hoping to provide advice. They have not been met with any enthusiasm, and we believe that it is a mistake because BPL is in a desperate situation, and as a result, our people are in a bad position. Michael, our hearts went out to the people of Michael listening to the Member of Parliament and the way in which this administration has not come to the rescue in a way that they need to. And of course, there were things that we could have gotten done that we didn't. But we listening to him, it was a very painful presentation. And of course, listening to the member for Abaco, I was so happy that he spoke up for his island. He said it was a disgrace. But we have already told you one of the solutions is really you need a new minister. That's definitely the case. You definitely need a new minister with responsibility for BPL and water and sewage. There are entirely too many difficult situations that he's simply not up to the task in managing. And so it is my hope that you'd move with some degree of urgency in addressing that particular issue as well. So I leave, Madam Speaker, with just a few thoughts on the way forward. We're an archipelago. And we should seek to be in the global energy conversation. One of the things that I was so inspired by, not just the Singapore story, but the Denmark story, where Denmark has dedicated significant resources, have entered into strategic alliances in order to build an energy island where they can generate power, not just service their country, but neighboring countries. I believe that the member for Exuma, the member for Freetown, the member for Golden Gates, you have so many talented young people on your side. We should be thinking about how do we get in the global conversation. This is an archipelago. We have islands that we can convert into energy islands in terms of entering into strategic alliances with people with deep pockets who are willing to work with us on our terms, utilizing our resources that first and foremost benefit our people, in order to look at how do we not only meet our domestic needs, but meet international needs. And so that is something it is my hope that this administration would give consideration to. If we could power up Ragged Island, what prevents us with the right partnerships from utilizing the acreage available in multiple islands to do some absolutely incredible and innovative things? Secondly, we ought to accelerate, in our view, accelerate the pace of the implementation of e-government and throughout all ministries, departments, and, of course, boards. We should move to accelerate the pace of encouraging Bahamians to establish saving accounts. I think one of the things your administration, and I recommend to the Minister of State for the Public Service, give consideration on talking with unions about getting our people to deposit some portion of their salary into a savings that can be earmarked for particular things. A number of countries have gone the route of trying to encourage a national savings plan. We are saving too little in this country, and as a result of it, Bahamians are struggling, and politicians have become the godfathers and mothers in a patronage system that is not healthy. That's why when I hear us celebrate the lunch program, I support it. All of us do feeding programs. But my God, if that is what we aspire to as a 21st generation of leaders, Our people want to be able to earn money to feed themselves. But I think doing it is important. Doing it is important. It is important, and I support it. However, we should also apply our ingenuity and genius to how do we put our people in a position where they could feed themselves. We also need, in improving the ease of business, we need to accelerate the pace of the evaluation of our environmental impact assessments. We have had a department that sometimes has been an albatross around the neck of the country. We need to make sure that we protect our environment, but at the same time, we move with a sense of urgency to evaluate and get these projects on the road. We need to eliminate the two-tier system of where in Freeport, you cannot approve a project if there's an environmental component without having to come to New Providence. We need to end that nonsense. We need to make sure it's a one-stop shop. We have laws that can govern all of the Bahamas, and the bylaws, once amended in Freeport, those bylaws will be what governs the decision-making around approving projects, and if there are any excesses or oversight by the municipal body, the government, through an auditing system, can check them. And so, again, we need to improve the ease of doing business. We need to dramatically reduce the need for citizens and visitors to continue to submit KYC documents. We also need to ensure that we put online rules that govern all aspects of our national life. How you set up a company in the Bahamas. How do you, for example, apply for anything related to work permits, and that the system online works. Unfortunately, we are running into problems in terms of lengthy waits for the simplest things in the country, and we have to do better as a people. We should also accelerate the approval process for the construction industry, which includes getting plans approved, inspection of buildings being inspected on time, and occupancy. In my former life, when I did HR consulting, one of the things we attempted to do at Ministry of Works is to create a flow chart to look at how long it is presently taking from the time a plan is submitted, goes to the various ministries, and people get approval, and how do we change that system. We now need to get back to that. Money is not going to park in the Bahamas and wait for an opportunity to flourish. It'll go elsewhere if we keep joking. And so we have to fix this system. We have to also accelerate the pace of issuing both oral and written judgments in the court system. Justice delayed is justice denied. And far too many persons have concerns about getting a final judgment to move on with their life in different ways. And so it is our hope that that process will also pick up. It is also important that we create an environment that fosters job opportunities for our people, and to ensure that people coming in at the blue-collar level and the white-collar level does not displace our people. I mean, again, when I did training for financial services company, I always found it amazing when some companies try to do this sexy thing of creating a job description that only the person they have in mind could qualify for that job. We need to ensure that we hinder them from being successful in that regard. We also know if we're going to be successful as a country, securing strong financial markets are incredible, and we know that the financial services sector is doing a wonderful job, but I would love to see that we create a junior stock exchange for young Bahamians who are into whether it's green bonds or blue bonds. We have countries, even in the region, who have gone that route, and it is my hope that this administration would look at it. If you don't, certainly in another 2 to 3 years, we'll take care of that, but we hope you are able to move on that sooner. We also believe that we must implement effective regulations to enhance economic growth, to monitor the money supply, protect copyrights, and, of course, to create shared ownership. Far too much of what is indigenous to the Bahamas is being traded on internationally. We're not doing enough to protect Bahamian creatives locally or in the global market. And then, of course, with respect to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, as I said to the Prime Minister the other day, there is significant confusion around the investment fund that has been passed and the Sovereign Wealth Fund. There is confusion around whether or not revenues that would be earned from the carbon credit, whether or not we can ring fence the funds and earmark it to very specific things. Certainly, we have had presentations. We understand more than Joe Public, but we believe that this government has to engage the Bahamian public to have a conversation about how we are valuing their natural resources, monetizing it, adding value, and of course, trading. Right now, the public has a jaundiced eye when it looks at policymakers and our natural resources, and so we encourage the government to engage with the public. Again, we believe it is in our collective interest that you do so. We also believe that there's huge opportunity in the blue economy, retrofitting vessels so that Bahamians can engage in deep sea fishing to catch pelagic species. We believe that there's a huge economic opportunity for Bahamians. We do not want foreigners fishing in Bahamian waters. So government and private sector working with entrepreneurs to raise the required resources to either retrofit the vessels or have vessels designed in order to do deep sea fishing. We believe that it is a win-win proposition for us as a country. So aquaculture, mariculture hold huge potential, and it is my hope that the Ministry with Responsibility for the Marine Resources will look at some of the studies that have already been conducted. More than 50% of all marine resources consumed are farmed, not caught in the ocean. And so there is an opportunity. We have no shortage of land. We have a pretty high unemployment rate, notwithstanding the representation by this administration. So we have a lot of people who are available, a lot of land that's available. What we need is creative minds to raise resources to help empower Bahamians. And so we challenge this administration to capitalize the Bahamas Development Bank, capitalize the Venture Capital Fund, make sure that SPDC that was serving us so well can live up to its potential. And so we are asking that more resources be made available. We'd like to see that $50 million this administration continues to assure the public is available every year in order to help them start or grow their business. In Grand Bahama, the Member of Parliament for Marco City, the Member of Parliament for Central and East Grand Bahama, we would love to have the Office of the Prime Minister come and meet residents in those constituencies who also have business needs to ensure that they are fully integrated in this opportunity machinery that we heard so much about in Grand Bahama, because many of them are unaware of the opportunities that exist, and we want to make sure that they're able to take advantage of it. With respect to public-private partnerships, Madam Speaker, we are hoping that the government will bring their policy paper on public-private partnership and that they would make it available to the public so that we can see it. We are also saying to the government that we are expecting resolutions to be brought into the House, because every one of those public-private partnerships that you enter into, essentially you are taking out a loan on behalf of the Bahamian people. And if you're taking out a loan on behalf of the Bahamian people, you should come to the House in order for us to have a discussion about the loans that you're taking out on our behalf. So Madam Speaker, as I wrap up where I began. We have an opportunity, Madam Speaker, to do something special in the next 50 years, Madam Speaker. But we need a government that is prepared to be fair to all Bahamians, not just PLPs, Madam Speaker. We need a government that is prepared to consult. The business community is saying this is not an administration that consults. Madam Speaker, we need a government that is prepared to apply the law evenly. You can't be running up on your opponents day in and day out. And when you got persons who have issues, nobody is calling them in for questioning, Madam Speaker. So we want a government that is going to govern, Madam Speaker, for all Bahamians. Marco City, Madam Speaker, we are going to vote on several matters in the budget, but I want to close simply by saying we do not support the Davis administration taking over Freeport. We do not support by any of the means that may be considered, because they are clearly not providing the details to the public. We are expecting the government to behave in a mature way, to have a sober conversation with members of the opposition and all stakeholders about what their intentions are with respect to Freeport. The Prime Minister spoke and created great uncertainty when he talked about Freeport by not being clear on what his and his cabinet intentions are. We stand ready to sit with the government, to sit with the owners of the port. We believe Freeport cannot remain the same way, Madam Speaker, just a minute or two. Freeport, Madam Speaker, Freeport, we do not support the status quo. We do not believe, Madam Speaker, that the Grand Bahama Port Authority ought to continue functioning in the manner that it is functioning. There has to be change, but we believe that change can only come as a result of dialogue between all of the stakeholders. What was suggested by the Prime Minister is worrisome. He ought to be clear and transparent about what he and his cabinet is considering. We are ready to sit and have a discussion about our future. With that, Marco City rests.